At the police station in Nancheng, a man went to Zheng Hong's office. With his hands crossed behind his back, he slightly turned his body towards the man and while staring into his eyes, asked if he was the lawyer for legislators Lai and Guo. This man was wearing a stylish suit and had a folder of reports in his hand. He began touching his glasses with his finger and while looking down at the floor, explained to Zheng Hong that he had been commissioned by the city council of the southern city. He also added that he had been specifically assigned to handle the case related to the detention of legislators Lai Tian and Guo Xuanzhen by the military and police department. Upon hearing this, Zheng Hong began to look at him with disdain and started wondering why the city council of the southern city had sent a lawyer specifically for the legislators. At that moment, his phone started ringing. The man stared at Zheng Hong while holding the report folder with one hand, extended the other hand, and with a smile asked him to please answer the call. At first, he stared at him blankly and began to wonder what he was thinking. But several seconds later, he took out his phone from his pocket to answer the call. He answered the call and asked who it was. The person who had called him revealed something terrifying, and upon hearing this, his expression changed drastically as he couldn't believe what he had just heard. At the same time, Tian Ran brought the woman's corpse to the police station. He sat on the floor, placed both hands on his knees, and started staring at the ground. Several seconds later, the woman's mother arrived at the police station. Upon seeing that her daughter was lifeless, she began to cry and ask him what had happened. While Tian Ran was staring at the ground with a lost look, he began to wonder who had been capable of doing something so terrible and cruel. He was sitting on some chairs, and next to him stood Yuan beside the woman's corpse, with the mother next to her, both arms resting on her daughter's body and crying. Yuan approached the woman and while looking at the daughter's corpse, she apologized to the mother. Tian Ran lifted his head and looked towards the woman with a sad look. At that moment, the lawyer appointed by the city council of the southern city to handle Lai and Guo's case opened the cell door, causing them both to come out. While holding the report folder in one arm, he smiled and told everyone that legislators Lai and Guo had suffered greatly inside the cell. Upon hearing their names, the woman slightly turned her head back. She clenched her teeth tightly and with tears in her eyes, she began to aggressively stare at them. Lai and Guo left the prison, and as they were walking towards the exit, the lawyer placed one hand on top of the other and asked them not to worry and also not to feel any mental pressure since he would take care of handling this case correctly. Upon hearing this, both started laughing. Lai stared at the lawyer in the eyes and asked him what kind of pressure a person as important as him could possibly have. Meanwhile, the woman began to stand up, and while her body was trembling, she stared into the lawyer's eyes and asked if both men were really Lai and Guo. Upon hearing their mother's voice, both the lawyer and Lai looked towards her and started wondering who she was. Lai stared at her intently in the eyes and with a smile, he asked her who she was. At that moment, the woman stood up from the ground, tears welling up in her eyes, and started moving quickly towards them. She revealed to everyone that her daughter had mentioned them. She also added that her daughter had been scared ever since she returned home because of the retaliation for Xinglu's account book and then died. Seeing her approaching them, Lai and Guo were somewhat confused. The mother began hitting Lai with her fists and ordered him to give back her beloved daughter. Lai looked into her eyes and thought she was crazy. She swore to him that she would kill both of them. Upon hearing this, he gave her a strong kick, causing her to stop hitting him and fall to the ground. Due to receiving the kick, the woman fell to the ground. Seeing this, Yuan quickly approached her to help and asked if she was okay. She asked Lai not to be too excessive since they were in a police station. Upon seeing the scene, Tian Ran stood up from his chair and stared at him aggressively, wondering why he had hit her. Yuan crouched on the ground and helped the woman, who started crying and feeling powerless as she was unable to teach a lesson to the people involved in her daughter's murder. Yuan stared directly into Lai's eyes and asked how dare he use violence in a military police station while being a prisoner under custody. While Lai was touching his wrist, he looked at Yuan with a contemptuous gaze and called her rude. Quickly, the lawyer stepped in between, extended both hands to the sides. He began looking her in the eyes and with a smile asked her not to defame someone. He explained that Lai had only defended himself since the elderly lady had lunged at him with the intention of attacking him. He took out the folder of reports and asked her to be careful with her words. He also added that both legislators, Lai and Guo, had completed the bail process, so it was not appropriate to rearrest them. The woman got up from the ground with Yuan's help. She stared directly into the lawyer's eyes and asked him what he was talking about. He pointed at her with the folder of reports and with a sinister look, he asked her to remain calm, as she was baselessly attacking two legislators. He also warned her that if she continued like this, he would hold her responsible for her actions. The woman started crying, and upon seeing this, Yuen placed a hand on her back to calm her down. Then she stared directly into the lawyer's eyes, thinking it was impossible. She asked him how a lawyer could process bail for a prisoner. The man began touching his glasses with his hand, and with a smile, he explained that he was going to remind an officer like her of something. He revealed to her that in order to arrest a legislator, physical evidence, written documents, witness testimonies, and the victim's statement were needed. While the lawyer was explaining this to them, Yuen and the woman began looking at him with contempt. Lai started touching his wrist, and while he was looking into Yuen's eyes, he simply started smiling. The lawyer mentioned again that in order to arrest a legislator, the statements and defense of the accused, expert opinions, inspection records, examination, identification, and research experiments were needed, as well as audiovisual material and electronic data. Tian Ran simply stared at the lawyer's eyes without saying a word. At that moment, the lawyer mocked Yuen and told her that a legislator couldn't be convicted without any evidence he had mentioned. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran's expression changed drastically. With a murderous look in his eyes, he began to stare intensely at the lawyer. Yuen became furious, and while staring into his eyes, she explained that they had already captured the cult leader, so the testimony was just a matter of time. Just before she could finish speaking, he approached her and with a smile explained that unfortunately more than 24 hours had passed since the maximum detention limit. He also revealed to her that he was going to take Lai and Guo away. Yuen clenched her teeth tightly, and as she looked into his eyes, she began to get angrier because she was unable to do anything about it. The lawyer started walking towards the exit with Lai and Guo and explained to both of them that Officer Yuen worked hard on her cases. He also added that he hoped in the future she would be able to properly distinguish between criminals and exemplary caregivers in order to prevent similar events from happening. The woman and Yuen simply stared at him in silence and didn't say a single word. The lawyer walked past her, and as he was heading towards the exit of the police station, he smiled and explained to her that their job was very busy and they didn't have much time to collaborate with her investigation. Upon hearing this, Yuen started looking aggressively at him and couldn't help but get angry. He turned his head to the side, and with a smile, he explained to her that the testimony she had mentioned already had a psychological diagnosis certificate issued by a doctor. He stared into Yuen's eyes and revealed to her that the statements were invalid. After saying this, he turned around and began walking towards the exit, while Yuen was holding onto the woman's shoulders. She looked at him and told him not to think that this was over, as Inspector Zhang Hong would not let this happen. She also revealed that she would be watching them until death. The lawyer simply smiled and mocked her, telling everyone that young people nowadays had a bad temper. Several seconds later, they passed by Tian Ran. The lawyer started smiling and revealed to her that this was a direct order from the country's National Security Department. He advised her if she didn't believe his words, then she could go ask the inspector herself. He revealed to everyone that he had just completed the official procedures at the inspector's office to pick someone up. Upon hearing this, Lai and Guo began to smile, while on the other hand, Tian Ran started staring at the ground with an indignant look. Several seconds later, the lawyer reached the exit of the police station, slightly turned his head to one side, and while looking at her, revealed that the witness she was talking about was also going to be transferred into custody of the Southern City Hospital. Upon hearing this, Yuen began to wonder how this was possible. At that moment, the lawyer looked aside and noticed something. Behind them was Tian Ran, who began to stare at them with a sinister look while his body exuded a murderous aura. Upon seeing this, the lawyer quickly turned around and started walking. He began to sweat and wondered how Tian Ran could have such a terrifying gaze. Several seconds later, the three of them left the police station and got into the car. The lawyer closed the car door and, while laughing, said goodbye to Yuen. The woman put her hands on her face and, while crying, explained to Yuen that her daughter couldn't be wrong. She also revealed that they couldn't bring down such important people like them. Upon hearing this, Yuen placed his hand on her shoulder and with a sad look, asked her not to cry. The woman began to tremble and told her that if even the police and the army couldn't punish them, then no one else would be able to make the culprits receive punishment. Yuen leaned closer to the woman, clenched her teeth tightly, and while staring at the ground intently, she started getting angry because she knew what she was saying was true. At that moment, a piece of paper flying by passed near her. At first, she was confused. Quickly, she grabbed the piece of paper in her hand, and while staring at it intently, she began to wonder what it was. She looked towards the door and saw how the wind was blowing more pieces of paper into the police station. Once the pieces of paper fell to the ground, she realized that it was Tian Ran's form, who was no longer in the police station. Several hours later, Tian Ran went to the orchard. While staring at the crops, some system windows informed him that the sacred level 4 fruit of divine increase were already ripe. Tian Ran approached the crops and with a sinister look, he began to stare at them intently. Several seconds later, another system window appeared to congratulate him on the harvest and informed him that there were a total of 100 level 4 tomatoes, with a total weight of 2.5 kilograms. Without hesitation, he picked up several tomatoes, held them in his hand while they were shining, and started staring at the ground with a murderous gaze. He put one of the tomatoes in his mouth and started chewing. Several system notifications appeared to inform him that evolutionary chromosome level 47 had been born inside his body, and the evolution had been successfully completed. The system also congratulated him for obtaining the type of evolution called atavistic type and for awakening the ability called avoid damage, as well as doubling basic properties. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.